Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I know we have the dinner at 5:30, but yeah, I think that'd be cool to because I'm trying to all my crypto friends and everything else, they're all, across the world. There's not too many, local uh where you can talk, crypto. It's very rare to meet somebody in person and
Right,
be able to have like a talk that doesn't involve Dogecoin.
right. Well, and that's strictly Bitcoin. I mean, you're not going to get any traction talking about anything with Bitcoin over there, unless it's just a
Yeah.
side conversation. To be perfectly honest with you. So
Yeah, no, I mean
just
that's
be aware of
Bitcoin's,
that.
yeah, it's the king, a bunch of Bitcoin maxis then, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody likes to think of them that way, but I mean, we don't have anybody that's huge bags, but
Yeah.
that I know of. Let's put it that way. But we
Yeah.
certainly do have some folks that are in a good position. But it's but it is a good conversation.
Okay.
Very focused. We can we've got sometimes Bobby Shell will show up. He's working with
Do you want
Voltage.
to on the song? Yeah. Not the song.
Doug Morton, our corporate secretary for SKIDA, was building a retail management system. It operates over Lightning. You can denominate everything in satoshis. Full. I mean, it can go into anything, basically. So it's really trying to develop more projects along those lines. And really have the focus of the folks that in the state that that
Yeah.
need policy
Yeah.
issues. I mean, that's really. I mean, and you got. I mean, we could have a separate conversation on that if that's something you're interested in pursuing.
Yeah, for
Given
sure.
what you're doing.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm definitely interested.
Yeah, great. Okay. Well, I don't want to rain on George's parade here. It looks like we've had a few people join us here in the last few minutes, so I'll hand it over to George. Is he there?
You've been licked. No.
Yeah. There you
Exactly.
go.
George got licked.
Gotcha.
Excuse me.
I got a bad hair day, so I'm staying off of video, man.
Oh no.
Gotta put a hat on.
That reminds me of that photograph of the two astronauts, the woman, the female, and the male that are up there in that capsule stuck in space. And they were doing an interview. Did you see them by chance? Her hair was like,
I did. She has curly hair.
So that's what
I'm having a
Dennis
bad
looks
hair
like.
day too.
So we appreciate no camera, Dennis.
Fair enough. Believe me, you don't want to see this hairdo.
Wow. Well, Aaron and Patty going to give us what the hell happened this week in the market.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you two take it away for a second, anyway.
All right. I'll start off and then mostly with crypto. I'm not making any more bold predictions. I made a couple bold predictions last week, and yeah, nothing turned green. So everything turned red and stayed red. And it was kind of interesting with the way everybody was trying to figure out what was going on, and then everybody started talking about this carry trade and the Japanese yen, and so started researching that. But as far as crypto goes, it was very weird to see. Typically on the weekends, you'll see movements wherever the price closes. Really, the daily close on Friday, it'll kind of reopen on Monday, similar, and you might have some volatility throughout the weekend. But typically, normally it'll return to its kind of where it closed at, but you didn't see that. You just saw red and you saw tons of volume, which isn't really normal. I mean, it's kind of illiquid on the weekends too. So I kind of thought maybe they're manipulating the markets just to take advantage of the weekend low volume. But it continued just to get red and more red, and Monday opened and just continue to see all that red. Which was good if you were in a short. I had a couple good shorts. I was, a couple good Bitcoin shorts. So that was all right. But then it was kind of like you stopped shorted, like I covered, and I thought the market was gonna, all right, cool, we hit some sort of support, but it just kept going down. So
Yeah.
that kind of led to, you saw, I think it was 48K on Bitcoin where it touched, which I didn't see that in the cards at all too. Like it went down to like 48. And
I saw 50.
That was a major resistance. And a lot of the crypto Twitter and everybody's like, oh, crypto's dead. What they didn't realize, it was a global pullback. So you had all these legacy markets. You had, gold, I think even went up a little bit, and then European markets, everything was down. So it wasn't just centric to crypto, it was everywhere. So then it's like, all right, what's the source of this problem? What's causing it? And then you have the World War III FUD, and then you have this carry trade, which I think we'll get into it too. I'll let Patty lead that. But as far as the pullback goes, if you look at COVID, you look at it was like I think 40% drawdown that you had. And then you look at Bitcoin, it was about 30%. And really the doom and gloom is what I do is I zoom out and I look at past cycles. So if you look at past cycles and you look at the 2017, 2021, and now the cycle where we're at now, there's not a lot of difference between them at all. And you'll see this dip that comes in, kind of this like fake bull run that comes up, and then you get this massive dip. And then it does recover in that October, November, December timeframe. I don't think we're out of the woods. I do think, potentially there's another big drawdown in September. And then you kind of have your tax sell-off in December. So it's nothing out of the ordinary compared to past cycles. If you've been in the past cycle, you're used to this up and down type movement. But yeah, and then you saw that quick recovery though too. So a $6,500 Bitcoin candle. So it went up from, what was it at? It was at like 54, 55, or maybe 56, and ran to 62. So 56,000 to 62,000 in a day, which is pretty good. But they're also going off the momentum of legacy markets, and Japan deciding not to raise rates as well. So all of that kind of fit into that. And
I
you
see
saw
Mark
that
shaking his head a little bit. Thank you, Aaron. I don't mean to cut you off, but
no.
see Mark shaking his head. I wanted to maybe bring Patty in too and just speak to that, the yen carry trade, the yen, YEN.
Right.
And just touch on that briefly, then we'll get on to the topic at hand.
Okay, because I think that was the catalyst for the sell-off and the over the weekend that led to Monday's downfall. But on Bitcoin, I just checked on Monday, the low was close to 49,000, and it's recovered. This morning we were at 60,000. So in 1 week it went up 10,000. That was pretty good, 10 or 11. So the catalyst was the Japan carry trade, which is basically Japan's interest rates have been at zero for the last 30 years. So there's about several $trillion that have been borrowing the yen and using those funds in risky investments like cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is one of the largest investments, they think, and all of the AI trades over the last 9 to 10 months with the AI and the mega caps running. They've used those funds to invest and speculate. And when Japan, so last week, Aaron, they did do one interest rate hike, which was a shock to the system. And it might have just been 0.25%.
Yeah.
But people in Japan panicked, sold off their market, and anybody in America who was also doing that yen trade, they talk about a lot on CNBC, not just from this past week, but over the past couple of years, they're constantly mentioning that. So I think a lot of hedge funds in New York are also part of the borrowers. So on Monday night, they said, we don't know how long it's going to take to unwind this trade. And the reason the market went down on Monday is people had to liquidate anything that they owned to pay for the margin calls that came in on the Asian market. So, geez, what was the point I was going to make? Sorry, I've forgotten. I'm looking at the highway. I lost my train of thought.
Well, I think that the margin call.
Yesterday.
Yeah,
I was gonna say Monday they were not sure how far along we were in the unwind, and yesterday they said, we think it's almost finished. So
Oh, they
if
did.
there is some sell-off, that it is not going to be because of this, any margin calls related to the yen trade. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, and then they also kind of like a bailout though too, is they put out a statement and said we're not going to, kind of bailed out everybody that was, over margined, getting those margin calls to prevent getting licked. And yeah, you had that sell off. You saw Nikkei or Nikkei, the pronunciation that dumped though too.
Nikkei.
Yeah, Nikkei. So all of that was just it creates that it's just like leverage trading though too, but on a giant international scale though too, when they're borrowing at that, that tiny interest rate. But it was the worst case scenario. The rates go up, the dollar goes down, you're over leveraged, and it's like, where do I get the money? I gotta go in my wallet and sell everything else just to cover my butt. So
Yeah, it
Nvidia,
impacted everything.
Microsoft, Apple, all of the semiconductors, they're down 50% at least. Very painful.
Well, thanks for the good
opportunity.
news, y'all.
Yeah.
Well,
On
The
Friday.
good news is you can buy the dip. Please
That's
do.
right. Buy
Yeah.
the dip. So yeah, but except for Mark, he's not buying the no dip.
It's not done dipping.
So we've got several people on the call that are going to talk to us a little bit about initiative that has been brought to my attention by the Palmetto Promise Institute, and from that is an initiative on the Sandbox, the tech Sandbox possibility to create an environment here in South Carolina that could create some interesting solutions to a number of different tech efforts. And so anyway, I want to introduce Felicity Rope, who's going to tell us about a little bit about an article that was written by the Institute and sort of what that's all about. And then I'm going to jump in, and Orrin can jump in as well anytime and speak on it. And then I'm going to just sort of highlight kind of what some other states are doing. And then Neil Rashley is going to give us a little background on what initiatives have happened in South Carolina with a sandbox, a tech sandbox environment. So with all that hoopla, I'm going to give it to Felicity and let her sort of tell us a little bit about what this is all about. I think you've got some interest here, Felicity.
I know, this is exciting. Hey, good morning, y'all. I brought my colleague Orrin Smith with me this morning in case, I know I talked to I was on the call a couple weeks ago, so in case y'all got bored with me, I brought Orrin as well because he's very good at talking. But yeah, good to be with you this morning. Orrin, do you want to introduce yourself? I said that right as you took coffee, of course.
Yes.
Well, it's
Yeah.
Dr. Orrin Smith, right?
Oh boy, you're very kind. But it was a social science.
I was gonna say, don't
So,
call if you're on a plane and need a doctor.
Yeah, with this group, it's probably considered kind of like a junior doctorate. But yes, I'm Orrin Smith. I'm the senior fellow at Palmetto Promise Institute in Columbia, at the corner of Main and Hampton Streets, and we're a public policy research organization. I was one of the founders in 2013, along with Ellen Weaver and Jim DeMint. So you probably know our co-founders of this group, and we've been working in fiscal policy, education policy, energy policy, just about every type of policy you can imagine. And what we generally do is we're all about research and relationship. So we are not in-depth policy researchers, though I think in education maybe we are, but we at least touch the surface enough to get a conversation going. And we generally have some relationships in the General Assembly that we can bring to bear to get what we're talking about up to bat. So we actually get at least a hearing, but maybe even get a bill passed from time to time. But Felicity is our policy guru, and she has been working with a group of interns, and she had the idea of giving the job of talking about sandboxes to one of our interns, and I was thrilled about that because I've been to numerous uh, roundtable discussions on sandboxes and thought that it might have a shot at getting somewhere in South Carolina. But Felicity will tell you kind of what our researcher found, and then we will either answer questions or say we'll get back to you on that. But thank you, Felicity.
Great, thanks, Oren. So yeah, what we have a blog post up about sandboxes. I can drop that in the chat for y'all. If you haven't read it, though I know some of you definitely have. But we looked into regulatory sandboxes around the country and then what that could look like here in South Carolina. And a regulatory sandbox, for those of you who don't know, is sort of a legal classification that lets companies be temporarily exempt from certain regulations. If they're in a certain sector, they have to apply and get permission to operate within the sandbox. But then they're able to kind of test technology innovations and different things that kind of fall outside the scope of existing regulations to see what might work. And so what that means is for the regulating body, whether that's, the state agency or if it's a federal sandbox, the federal agencies, to see, well, okay, what regulations do we need on this industry in the future? Because they just don't really know if it's, an emerging industry like fintech or something like that. And then for the company is able to innovate and kind of have the chance to explore different areas free from government regulations. And so there's a lot of different types of sandboxes around the country. And I think George was going to talk about some of those, so I won't steal his whole thunder. But a lot of them look at fintech. That's a big one. Insurance sandboxes are all very popular. Trying to remember, there any other? There's some. They're like a. What was the other real? There's like some really weird ones, like childcare sandboxes, like a childcare.
There's one on
Yeah. So there's just like a lot of.
One on self-driving cars in Detroit. I don't know how that's gone, but anyway.
Yeah, self-driving cars is a good example of something where it's like an emerging technology and maybe we need to have regulations on it, but a lot of times you don't know what regulations you need until you kind of see it in practice a little bit. So that's the sandboxes
Run somebody over. Yeah.
Yeah, so you run somebody over, exactly. So we've been looking at the prospect of launching a sandbox here in South Carolina. Our neighbors to the north in North Carolina have a joint fintech and insurance sandbox. So maybe that's something that we'd look to adopt. There's a couple states that have universal sandboxes, where it means that like companies in a lot of different areas, if they feel like they, operate outside the scope of existing regulations, can apply and ask to be part of the sandbox. So
what kind of sandbox are you going to try to create? South Carolina?
I think what we've looked at is maybe fintech and insurance, but open to conversations about it.
Insurance is a big one. Neil might know. I think, and of course, finance is a big one. But that seems to be the leading two sandbox efforts in a number of states.
Yeah, those are kind of the first things that they do is insurance and fintech, and then from there, they've often expanded to universal or different sorts of technologies from there. But that seems to kind of be the first step that other states.
Felicity, could I ask a question? What is there any similarity or the big differences between the Porter study of clusters and the sort of the new, what appears to be more of a regulatory thing with the with the sandbox? Any relationship there at all, or are you familiar with the clusters from the study, from the past study?
With the clusters, maybe Orange.
Yes, that rings quite a bell. Clusters was the buzzword on everybody's lips for a long time there. I'm talking to some economists down in Charleston about this. They were not necessarily as enamored with that concept, but it certainly held water at the time. So I don't know, it's something to be abandoned. But if we could we could blend those in some way, there will be people in the legislature that will resonate with.
Yeah, it seemed
Um,
the sense I get, the clusters were things like the airline, the car industry, these kinds of things. And it was bringing business to trying to promote business in that particular area and get people talking. This one
and
appears
promote
to
some
be
more focus. That way, if we have
right.
more focus, limited resources, we're a poor state, but if we
That's
focus,
right.
yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
This one
yeah.
appears to be a little more regulatory, in that you're trying to allow something to occur that's kind of unknown. So anyway,
It's
that's
experimental. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
And South Carolina, those of you, Jim, you've been in South Carolina a long time.
Mhm.
South Carolina doesn't tend to do this kind of thing, but I think the tide is really turning. We used to be a very, I guess what cultural
Yeah,
researchers might call a traditionalistic state.
yeah,
The question is always, why do we need to do anything differently?
yeah.
Let's do it like we've always done it. But, like for instance, getting rid of CON. Let me tell you, repealing CON, it was the most significant repeal of certificate of need laws since 1996 in America.
Yep.
And we did it in South Carolina. So there's this entrepreneurial, individualistic sort of free market culture that's just come out of nowhere. And a lot of it's because they're legislative leaders, particularly in the Senate, who are willing to carry the ball on this kind of thing. So when Felicity and the interns sent out this paper, this brief paper about sandboxes, we started hearing from legislators, and it was like, can this be happening? Legislators, and not backbenchers, powerful legislators that said, let's sit down and talk about this. And I'm so happy that we're able to have this time with this group because there's several people on this call that if we do sit down with legislators, we may need some backup that folks on this call could provide. So yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Aaron, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I just had a question. So it's essentially you're in the sandbox, the regulations aren't there, but how wide is that scope? Like, how wide does that boundary get with what you want to, I guess, put in the sandbox, or where do you draw the line in the sand? Is there does that make sense? The scope of it? Like,
Yeah. Like from my understanding, sandbox laws, they do kind of have, boundaries of the sandbox, and you can do this much and this much, and they're still subject to, basic health and safety regulation. It's not like saying like you have no regulation whatsoever to do whatever you want, but there's sort of a set guide, like you still have to follow, these very basic things.
okay. Yeah, I was thinking more the cryptocurrency side with a lot of these lending protocols and a lot of the stuff that they're innovating with, whether it's NFTs and everything else that you could try to put out there where there isn't, regulation currently.
Right.
But yeah.
There was an attempt a few years ago at doing something legislatively, and there was just two problems. And this is my personal opinion: wrong bill sponsor and wrong lobbyist. So between not having a very good lobbyist and not having a very good champion, it failed. So part of this for us, and I don't want to say we're going to be, checking the wind, but we need to know kind of what legislators are interested in, key legislators. So I'm going to pitch the idea of having some hearings where we can maybe get a bill filed that's very similar to another state or a neighbor state, but then the guts of manipulating what that bill is going to look like will be done in a subcommittee. So at that point, we might be able to expand it or contract it or polish it to see what we think we might could get through.
Yeah, I know Wyoming and Nebraska, as far as cryptocurrency goes, they're definitely on like the forefront doing that. I know Mike Flood, he's I think he just got reelected, but yeah, he pushed a digital banking asset for there's a coin called Telcoin, but they have a digital banking charter that they push through their state as well. And it's pretty interesting what they're doing out there, and they're trying to keep everybody in their state to prevent them from going out. And I watched some of the court proceedings and stuff too, and you have these young kids that are 19, 20 years old, giving their testimony that I'm going to go to this country and build this because I can't build it here. So it's pretty interesting.
George.
Neil, do you want to take it?
Or,
Yeah, can I go
well,
ahead and
can
weigh
I
in
just
here?
ask a question? Oren, I was curious who the former sponsor of the legislation was.
Yeah, Patty.
Yeah.
I can pretty much weigh in on all this because I was involved in all of it.
Come
back then.
closer to your microphone, Neil.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I could certainly help along those lines. Neil,
Yeah.
let me hand it to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Neil.
Because Oren brought it up as a perfect time to go ahead and weigh into what I know. Because Oren's correct in that this was about 2019. In fact, it's how Dennis and I met each other. And had a lot of good conversations. And the bill itself certainly had a lot of good intention, but it was a lot of issues in one bill that frankly took Wyoming language and tried to shove it into South Carolina. And it just wasn't going to work. It needed a lot of work. And that was our opinion on it. We were kind of neutral. Senator Davis is the one who introduced the bill. And back then, of course, he was not the chairman of a committee or anything like that. But nonetheless, he at least introduced it to start that discussion. Similar to what Oren's talking about, maybe for the future, is to get something introduced. I think a lot of those issues that were in that bill have evolved separately, such as the Uniform Commercial Code issues, and are being worked on separately. My advice would be that, and right now, as the Bankers Association, we're going to be fairly neutral, just got to see what the product is going to be introduced out there, is to focus on the sandbox. Let legal issues like the UCC evolve on their own. If you're going to have something concerning anti-money laundering, you better have some attorney general buy-in, because otherwise it's going to kill your bill that has a regulatory sandbox. So I think it was a great way to start the discussion in South Carolina. And then, of course, we all know that 4 months later, COVID shut everything down and changed everything. So maybe it needed that 3 or 4 years break to see what other states have done. And I would suggest, although I don't know the details of theirs, but Oren knows this, and Patty knows this, in South Carolina, what North Carolina and Florida have done are probably going to be more of the guide star than other states. It's not a criticism of Wyoming, but they are the Wild West, and they have a very different economy than South Carolina does. They had different needs out there to push something more aggressive. So certainly you can learn from what they've done, but I'd look much more from a sandbox perspective to what other states close to us have done. They're more similarly politically. I'll kind of stop there because that was my involvement back then. Nothing's really been proposed since then. Dennis and I have talked a lot here and there, but that's been it.
Yeah, I'll just weigh in. I mean, obviously the precursor to this, really, in my opinion, is the UCC Article 12 amendment, because that lays the groundwork for a lot of the language that you need for a fintech sandbox in South Carolina. That was part of a problem. The 2019. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just want to tell you real quick where that is. Okay. Because I got involved in that with the bar because in South Carolina, if you're looking at introducing new articles to Uniform Code or Uniform from the Uniform Law Commission, we have what was known as the South Carolina Law Institute. I've worked a lot of changes at the UCC over the years. This is the law school and other, if you will, kind of legal experts in certain fields that look at the different changes that are out there. I know they have a working group on Article 12 and the similar issues. Frankly, I've been kind of pushing them for a number of years to get going on this. I don't know exactly where it is. So again, separately as to UCC issues, I know they are working on that, but that is definitely something that the bar, the dean of the law school, and others are involved in. So if that's a necessary component, they've got to have some input also.
Yeah, I mean, because really, this was driven largely in Wyoming because of their perception or recognizing that they could create a new banking system out there, a new full reserve bank. So So the Sandbox was created specifically for that purpose. That was the underlying language in their crypto policy. All along, I mean, the focus was specifically to get the Speedy Bank, set up and be able to create it. I mean, our best. I mean, based on the research